everyone, and welcome to the second annual Edge My Shift event. I'd like to take this time to thank you all for joining us today. The goal of today's event is to identify some of the challenges that women face in the mining industry and to explore the opportunities that can be created to ensure that more women can build more successful careers. Today's event will consist of a panel discussion followed by a Q&A. I'll introduce our panelists in just a moment, but before I do that, I'd like to take this time to thank our sponsors, New Gold and Capstone, for today's event. New Gold is a Canadian-focused intermediate mining company with a portfolio of 2 core producing assets in Canada. New Gold's vision is to build a leading diversified intermediate gold company based in Canada that is committed to environmental and social responsibility. Capstone Mining is a base metals producer with 2 producing copper mines. Their strategy is to focus on the optimization of operations and assets in politically stable, mining friendly regions. They are committed to the responsible development of their assets and the environments in which they operate. Thank you again to these 2 great sponsors for helping make today's event possible. Now, just a few housekeeping items to note. The event will be recorded and will be available for replay following the event. So do have a look at the shift2.edumine.com website in a few days' time. Throughout the panel discussion, you are all welcome to ask questions. Please submit your questions in the Q&A window located at the bottom of your screens. Okay, now let's meet our panelists. Because we don't have much time and we have such amazing speakers, I will briefly introduce them. And if you want more information, you're welcome to go to the Shift website as well as their LinkedIn to connect with them. So I would like to introduce, first off, we have Daniela Dimitrov, who is the President, CFO, and Interim CEO at IAMGOLD. Hi, Daniela.
Hi.
Next up, we have Monica Moretto, who is the VP of Sustainability, Diversity, and Inclusion at Pan America Silver. Hi, Monica.
Good morning.
Morning. Next up, we have Simon Gillibrand, who is the Global Head of Natural Resources at CSG Talent. Hi, Simon. Great to have you today.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Next up, we have Andrea Carter, who is a neuroscience-based equity, diversity, and inclusion senior strategist and consultant at Andrea Carter Consulting / The Talent Company. Hi, Andrea. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Next up, we have Dana Prey, who is a principal at Prey & Company. Hi, Dana. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning.
Morning. Next up, we have Jamie Wolcott, who is the Director of Labor Market Information at Mining Industry Human Resources Council. Hi, Jamie. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And last but not least, we have Melanie Larouche-Bover, who is the Junior Mining Engineer at DRA Global. Hi, Melanie.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you all for being here and being a part of this discussion today. So let's dive right in. Let's get started. So the way the panel discussion will work is that we will go through the 3 stages of a woman's mining career: exploration, establishment, and retention. In these stages, we will explore the challenges, we'll look at the successes, and we also look at the opportunities. We first want to have a look at the exploration stage. This includes women that are still in school, those who are fresh out of school, and those that are getting ready to enter the mining field. So Melanie, I wanted to ask, being the youngest person kind of in the industry on this panel, why did you choose the career path? What are some of the challenges that you have experienced so far?
Yeah, so just before I go into why I chose mining or how I got to it, I just want to acknowledge the fact that I'm from a fairly privileged background, being bilingual, white, middle class, and Canadian, and that my experiences don't necessarily represent the other women of my generation. So for example, at McGill in mining engineering, pretty much all of my female peers were either women of color, not Canadian, or both. So I'm coming from a slightly different background.
Okay.
So now how I chose mining. I grew up in Ottawa, Ontario. My mom's a physio and my dad is an electrical engineer, but works more on the management side. No one in my family has ever worked in mining. We had nothing to do with mining in any way. It was quite a surprise when I told them I wanted to be a mining engineer one day.
Yeah.
So when I was in high school, I decided I would take every single science course I could in order to not close off any doors, because I knew I wanted to be an engineer, didn't know what kind yet. And at my school, there was a course called Sciences de la Terre et de l'Espace, which translates to Earth and Space Sciences. But the caveat with this course is that it was only offered every 2 years if enough students signed up for the class. And so I know it hadn't been taught for at least 6 years prior to my generation, But by some miracle, we were actually 5 people who signed up my year, and so the course was actually taught. And we were lucky enough that our teacher had worked in exploration for De Beers. So our class was very much heavily focused on the Earth side rather than the space side of the title. And he was able to explain a lot about his geology background and exploration background, and by extension, the mining industry. So that's when I first started to learn about the industry. And I think I got really hooked into it when he decided to take us on a field trip, which was a whole day away from school. And he told us to bring a hammer so that we could smash our own rocks. And I think you can imagine a group of high schoolers going away for a day with a hammer. I was hooked. So that's essentially how I got interested in the mining industry. And then in grade 12, when I had to start applying for schools, I asked my dad, who's an engineer, to explain every single type of engineer that there was. And the way that he explained mining, for me, it sounded like the perfect blend of white collar and blue collar. So that I could sit in an office if I wanted to, but I could also strap on my boots, put on some coveralls, and go out into the field if I wanted to. And that's exactly what I was looking for in my career. So I decided that mining was the place for me. Like I said before, my family was a little bit confused and very supportive, but just generally confused as to how I came to that decision. But a few years later, here I am, and I'm still very, very happy with my choice. And I have faced some challenges in my very short career so far, but I think by far the biggest one was just finding out that the industry had anything to offer me at all. In high school, because I'm not from a mining town, I don't have any mining in my family. If it wasn't for enough people signing up for that class, and it happens to be offered, my teacher actually having worked in the mining industry before, and my dad, who's an engineer, actually being able to explain what mining engineering was, those are all very low probability things to have happen. And if it wasn't for all of those things happening, I wouldn't be here today in the mining industry. I honestly don't know what I would be doing. So that was my biggest challenge so far.
Okay, nice. Thank you for sharing that with us. Jamie, I wanted to direct to the next kind of question to you, being that you are heavily in the human resources sector. Can you talk a bit about labor market trends in mining and how they influence the industry's ability to secure talent?
Yeah, certainly. So there are several performance indicators regarding women in mining, but by far the one I get asked about the most is still women's representation in the mining industry, and for good reason. I think there's an expectation that there will be a dramatic change here. So, for example, you have the Canadian Minerals and Metals Plan, and that has a goal of 30% women in the mining workforce by 2030. So nearly a double of what it is currently. And yet we haven't really seen much improvement historically, or at least it's been rather slow. So according to the labor force survey, we have the average representation going up about 3% over the last decade. So the question is, why is this such a hard thing to move? We've known about this issue for a while now, and a lot of attention and great resources have been devoted to this problem. And so that's kind of my objective. I want to talk about why increasing women's representation is a challenge and how we may eventually find progress. So that's, so at first glance, we may view this as a mining only problem. So meaning that there is constant competition with other industries over talent, and mining is the one that is behind. But this is often not the case. Keep in mind, mining shares a labor pool with other industries. And in some instances, the pool is much too small to support any of these industries, including the mining industry. So this means that all industries drawing on that labor pool are going to be behind. And I just want to give an example of what I'm talking about. So if we look at the trades occupations that are found in the mining industry, so these are your heavy mechanics, your pipe fitters, millwrights, et cetera. So according to the last available census, in the mining industry, women represented about 2% of trades occupations. In other industries, women also represented 2% in these same occupations. So other industries are also underperforming. So to me, this suggests two things. First, we didn't necessarily lose women when they were picking their industry. We lost them when they were picking their occupation. So in this case, what may look like an issue for the mining industry is actually something much broader. Second, it doesn't matter if we outcompete other industries if the underlying labor pool is too small. And knowing this can certainly inform our strategy for how we're going to overcome this. So here we may want to focus or emphasize labor force development over recruitment. So this means collaborating with other industries to grow the whole labor pool in these occupations. In other words, competition with other industries alone will not be sufficient to move the needle. We also find occupations where the opposite is true. There is a large enough labor pool and mining is underperforming other industries. So in this case, focusing on competition would be the better strategy. So I just want to summarize, I just say that I think the ideal approach will vary by occupation. And for each occupation, we need to understand the size and composition of the labor supply so that we can tailor our strategy accordingly. And this is where, MIR's labor market information is currently focused. And I'll just conclude by saying, we're familiar with women's share of the mining workforce as the common measure of representation. But this is going to tell us very little about the size of the potential labor pool from which mining is acquiring talent. So instead, MIR is interested in an alternative measure. We'll call it mining share of women's labor supply, because this will inform our strategy and tell us whether our goals are feasible.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. And Simon, who is another person in HR, kind of looking at this early stage of a person's mining career in this exploration stage, when looking for a great candidate, for example, someone fresh out of school, what are the attributes that you look for? What are the attributes that you find make a difference in the market?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think there's two sides. There's one looking for people joining the industry, I say out of university and school, then also looking for individuals, experienced individuals who are looking to join the industry from, another industry and associated industry as well. A bit like sort of Melanie, I think a lot of people maybe I speak to when I mention that we do search in the mining industry, they still see it as somebody down there with a pickaxe picking some coal and things like that. And then you start talking about the industry and what there is and the changes in them, and it kind of still blows people's mind, the size of the industry, the technology, the innovation, and all the things that go into it, and not just what's maybe been seen historically as mining, really. So what we've seen when we've been searching for individuals over the years, the skill sets are now looking to heavily evolve. I think EY did a report where they said 80% of mining roles are going to be redesigned due to technology. So thus the skill set we're looking at during the industry is now drastically changing in itself as well. It does mean for some of our searches, we are actually competing against Amazon and Google for candidates, which 8-9 years ago, that wouldn't have even been a thought. Mining companies just competing against other mining companies. I think also looking into the backgrounds of people joining the industry, it's the skill set, looking at people maybe from robotics, from cybersecurity, or really where there's been a technology influence. Again, it's opening up a fantastic career opportunities for individuals. We're doing a large assignment now with one of the major mining companies, and they're really focused on the decarbonisation of mining. So we're speaking to people from SpaceX, NASA, from Boeing, and they've maybe never considered the mining industry before, but now look at the opportunity to come into an industry, really revolutionize the industry, but seeing the opportunity, if you can decarbonize the mining industry, that's going to have a real world effect on all other supply chains, renewables, and things of that nature. So now the attraction and skill sets of people who want to make a difference in the world, the mining industry, where historically might not have got seen that, is now being seen as a great opportunity to have an influence. So again, this opens up with the skill sets of individuals we're looking for. We're now talking a lot broader about the sort of the passions, the motivations. I think historically, money was a big driver for the mining industry, where a lot of people came to the industry as a sole career there. But now they're really seeing the opportunity to make a difference and do something more. So yeah, I think, skill set wise, with the advancement in electrification, VR, AR, robotics, drone use, it's people who really want to embrace technology, make a difference for an industry, but have that passion where they can travel, where they can see the world and make a difference. So, yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot more attraction to industry now from graduates, but also from people from associated industries. Then maybe, you know, sort of 6-7 years ago, we wouldn't have really seen as much.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. And then kind of following up on what Simon said, Dana, you are another person in HR, and I'd like to kind of address the same type of question to you. At such an early stage in a person's career, it's kind of hard to tell the attributes that can translate into success. Being a recruiter in the industry for so long, what are some of the attributes that you've seen?
You know, great question. Adding to Simon is difficult. He talked so much about technology. When we go look for people straight out of school, it's people that are interested, but I'd like to turn that around a bit and see. I really believe that the mining industry can do a lot better job on getting people to that stage. And I think that's where we really need to focus, in particularly with women. You know, I was at a large mining company for a while where we were starting with 9% representation in women in mining at that particular site. And I think it was really about the mine telling people who we were and what opportunities there were. So when we are out talking to the schools, I think we need to start doing it at a lot younger age. We do, as a mining industry, tend to get into universities fairly well, but we're not getting into the people that are younger and talking to girls about opportunities in mining. We're really viewed as such a a rough industry, perhaps, that it may not be attractive. And so it goes back to what Simon said on telling the world what a difference we do make and how much technology we have. We are not picks and axes. And it just breaks my heart when I talk to somebody that doesn't know about mining and they bring out the pick, right? And that's what they think of. And so if we as a mining industry can make different, a different type of representation, you know, show them the automated equipment, show the world what we really have to offer and get that interest. So when I'm at a school, I am looking for somebody that can talk to me about mining and all of the interesting things that we do and all the different careers that we have. But we, as a mining industry, I believe, are really responsible for getting students to have that interest.
Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned. And I was having a conversation another day with regards to kind of marketing material that is used to kind of promote the industry. Is there enough representation in those type of marketing materials? Are women seeing themselves on brochures and presentations? And any thoughts on that?
So I do see more and more of it, of women being a part of the marketing. We certainly are making an effort that way. Let's make sure that we are making an effort with women doing exciting technology things, not necessarily only behind a desk, but doing like Jamie talked to early, some of the trades.
Yeah, because women are interested in those things as well. It's not just for men. Okay, interesting. Thank you. All right. So Monica, I wanted to ask you, from your experience and what you've seen in your career, what are some of the programs and possibilities offered that consider diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about everything that everybody was saying, and I just want to add a few things to what has been said, and obviously my opinion on training. Yesterday, I actually saw on the news that 35 to 40% of the existing workforce in the world are thinking about changing jobs. I see that as a crisis, but also as an opportunity. As one of my best friends and also one of my amazing mentors in life said, 50% of the world population are composed of women. Why are not tapping into that talent? Why not? 50% of the population. And then from 2015 to 2019, I'm going to steal some of Mir's information, 33% decrease on women trying to get into engineering schools and 22% decrease also on women trying to get into geology, just as information. This was pre-pandemic. And during the pandemic, all these things got exacerbated by crisis, and a lot of personal crisis also on us, trying to reinvent ourselves, trying to understand what happened. That created a real, I would say, emotional crisis in the world, not just health crisis. And so all this stuff has a lot to do because it does has an effect on mining. Mining constantly is ridden by margins. Sometimes the conversation around margins and grades overtake any other conversation on the workforce. I think mining companies also struggle to create the real effect on it. And I'll go back to something that Simon was saying, but to me, the real effect is at the base. I mean, most companies right now have been doing what they could and successfully, I would say, at the top of the pyramid with the VPs, the directors, the board members, and but unfortunately, the biggest numbers are sitting at our base, at the foundation of the mine, our workers. And those numbers are really poor down there. And I think that that's what we need to start today, because we've already done the other part and we're already working well on that part, but not working well at the foundation. And to me, it's not just the education programs or the talent capturing at the school level, but I will flip it and I will say that it's all about retention. If our retention packages and our retention practices are optimal, it will be word of mouth. People that is happy and women that are happy working in the mining industry will come back to others, and then other people will say, because it's a community ripple effect. So I will say that people naturally will be like, well, I want to hear more about it. We hear about people working in techie companies raving about it and how they love the environment. We barely hear women talking about how they love working in the mining industry. We do hear women saying it, of course, and we probably are in this panel, most of us, but I would say that we don't hear a lot of women raving about the industry constantly. And on top of this, a small group that unfortunately does have a domino effect. So I think that our company has done a lot on retention in the last years and during the pandemic with, extension of maternity leaves and creation of parental leaves also that goes beyond that. It includes, for example, in our mines in Canada, we actually went beyond that and we consider surrogacy, adoption, same-sex marriage, a lot of other things that are appealing to the workforce in today's world. The workforce, as we know it, has changed and is changing. Close to 75% will be millennials. That is the people that we need to appeal to. And the way the mining is working nowadays is not appealing to them. And so, changing maybe the hour work, the shift work. I know I'm saying all things that most of us will be like, oh my God, this is stressful because it will drive costs up. And that is the other discussion that we need to have. Where are we going to go from this? Because we do have limitations. Most of the mining companies will have limitations and projects are driven by cost. And a lot of the decisions are determined because of that. So there are a lot of questions out there. But I think in order to really capture more people, we need to flip the conversation to more retention, better retention, to a proud culture of mining, and to new practices. And a lot of it also will be determined by artificial intelligence, by mechanized and automated mines, and that will create different types of roles in the workers' role, right? Because they will be working from different areas. Won't be underground, a lot of them, but will be probably in a center managing joysticks, and all that stuff will change the workforce and will make it more appealing to a new group of people that are the people that are coming through now on the workforce, because a lot of us are in our last 5-10 years and we'll be retiring soon, right? So we need to think about that succession.
Nice. That's great. Yeah, thank you. A lot of really good information. So I want to direct this next question to Andrea. Andrea, where and how do you feel the mining industry has room to improve and grow to make the industry more attractive to women that are wanting to enter?
That's a great question, Akua. Thank you for asking it. I'm a big proponent of data-driven answers. So for that reason, I'm going to approach this question really based on the recent mining industry research that I've been conducting for my practicum and my thesis. I'll preface that, as Jeannie and Monica also indicated, North America stands in the face of a huge paradigm shift as talent risk actually moves into a top 5 category. When we look at organizations of any size or industry, and this was, building on what Simon had said as well, at the heart of the risk is the existing lack of business goals and strategy that intersect with EDI, so equity, diversity, and inclusion, corporate social justice, and environment, social governance. So it's important to understand that for my thesis, I really only needed 500 participants and 5 companies to study so that I could have statistical reliability and produce internal consistency within the mining industry and to understand the mining population. I ended up with 13 TSX listed mining companies participating in the research and 3,508 participants. So that really speaks to the desire to understand more and to look at ways to address this issue from a different lens. Now, the study was set up to understand talent within the mining industry and specifically to measure and create methodology around who belongs. So I chose this focus of study, with the understanding that the Canadian mining industry is faced with a risk of massive talent shrinkage, specifically in the next 10 years. And if we don't change this, it has the potential to lose its global status as a top mining country. So I wanted to look at the statistical analysis that went beyond the usual engagement surveys. And the reason for this is because most engagement surveys have a fundamental flaw. And that flaw is that they measure the majority of perceptions, but they hide the pertinent information that's required by those marginalized populations, such as women. So I specifically wanted to understand belonging through 5 key indicators of belonging, which are proven through the neuroscience lens. So that is comfort, contribution, connection, psychological safety, and well-being. And then I wanted to understand, how can belonging act as a mechanism for competitive advantage and growth with governance and metrics that are aligned with business goals. So in plain language, really, I first needed to understand who belongs, what makes them feel they belong, and then how does belonging change engagement, job satisfaction, and motivation to be in the industry. So let me get to the exciting data part. So when we looked at baseline demographics, I essentially looked at career level, years in mining, gender identity, and ethnicity identity, because I wanted to understand the majority perception of belonging as it opposed or as it compared to minority perception of belonging. Now, the analysis revealed that the bulk of the population within the study, so the 3,508 participants, are within the technical operator, supervisor, or management roles, with the lowest population being in entry level. Now, those entry level positions are predominantly held by women, but when we look at the technical operator, supervisor, middle management roles, those have the lowest proponents of women. So of an overall picture, 75% identified as male, 23% identified as female, and 2% identified as non-binary, third gender, or other gender expressions, or preferred not to say. Now, ethnicity was actually quite diverse within the mining industry in this specific study. It did reveal that there were quite a number of different ethnicities that were represented, but the results were skewed because 3 of the companies have operations in Africa and Latin America. So 40% identified as white or Caucasian, 30% identified as Black, 9 as Latin America, 9 as mixed ethnicity, and 3 as Indigenous peoples. All other ethnicities accounted for were under 1%. Now here's where it gets really interesting. When we look at these populations and we understand the data of who feels they belong, what the predictors of belonging are, and how those 5 key indicators reveal the biggest areas of strength versus the biggest areas of opportunity. And the fact that meta-analysis of belonging indicates that it is the highest predictor of engagement, job satisfaction, and motivation for talent. The predictors of belonging within the mining industry research are gender, ethnicity, and career level. So as a whole, when we look at that information and we understand who feels they belong and when, and we look at those indicators of belonging, including a total belonging score for comfort, contribution, connection, psychological safety, and well-being. The contribution scores and who had the ability to contribute at the highest level also had the highest indication of belonging. Well-being, on the other hand, which varied by gender and ethnicity, was statistically significant and was the biggest area of opportunity. So while there's so much more to this research, the full white paper actually comes out next week. The statistical significance points to creating a culture of belonging as a means to grow the industry and restabilize talent growth. When we look at that, we have to look at the elements that go alongside how we are viewing women as well as ethnicity and those lower proponents. And that is actually revealed more extensively within the data and the report itself.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea, for that. All right, so we've covered the early stages. Now we want to move to establishment stage, which is early to mid-career. And we want to look at the challenges, the opportunities, and the successes in this. So I wanted to direct my first question to Daniela. Culture and mindsets, as you know, they can vary. As shown by the recent Rio Tinto report, bullying and sexism can be a major problem at mine sites. What are some other factors that makes it so hard for women?
Thanks. For sure, those, sexism and bullying is in a sense so much in your face. But there are those other subtle ways that make it challenging. And I really liked the theme that Andrea was talking about, which is belonging. And some of the challenges, that I can share, I've experienced in my own career in mining, are more the subtle things, being interrupted all the time. Having people finish, one sentence, having people talk about your views while you're right there, rather than expressing your own views, not being heard, not being listened to, expressing a viewpoint around a particular topic that falls on deaf ears, and someone else expressing the same viewpoint 2 minutes later, and it being a fantastic idea, really all contribute to feeling like you don't belong in this industry. And I think that those are the types of things that contribute to creating that culture, the culture of everybody belongs, everybody is being listened to, everybody, there should be a safe space where that you create for everyone to express their viewpoint on that. Of course, there are, along with the obvious, I'm going to say, would be facilities and infrastructure, and I'm sure that there are still mine sites that don't have appropriate facility to all the appropriate facilities to encourage that gender diversity, and that is something that is really easily fixable, and when one just really needs to pay attention to, and it's something that can really easily be taken off the table. So I'm talking about change rooms, I'm talking about bathrooms, things like that, and didn't think that we'd be talking about those kinds of things in 2022, but I think that those are still things that we can do better at some of the sites. One of the things that I think about in terms of challenges, and that goes to retention, is around advancement. So how do we create an infrastructure around advancement that we take into consideration that everybody is different? There's a great quote by Sir Richard Branson, and the quote goes something along these lines, that if someone offers you an opportunity and you don't feel you're qualified for it, put up your hand, take it, and figure it out later. And, you know, not everybody's like that in terms of pursuing advancement and pursuing putting up our hand for that promotion. You know, I can share with you that I know a lot of women that feel that they need to have 150% of qualifications for a particular role for them to put up their hand and say, you know what, yeah, I'm going to apply for this particular job. And we need to be attuned to that, and we need to think about that in advancements, in promotions, in succession planning, because not everybody is the same. And just because you don't make it in a sink or swim kind of environment, or just because we all got to where we got to in a sink or swim kind of environment, it doesn't mean that those individuals are not great talent that we should be watching out for and promoting them. So, you know, those are the kinds of things that I guess I think about when I think about challenges, overall lack of diversity, culture, lack of senior women in leadership are, you know, again, some of the other impediments and challenges that we'll need to continue to work on.
Great, thank you. I wanted to kind of go to Dana next, another kind of HR question in dealing with establishment stage. From your experience in working with HR, what would you say that successful recruiting companies are doing right to ensure that the establishment stage women are happy and wanting to kind of grow within that company?
You know, I guess I'll just speak for myself. I think really telling my own story over and over, not just to women, but the leaders in different mines. I've been in mining for many, many years. Part of that 9% I talked about earlier, and in leadership positions. And you know, I think other people, Daniela talked about the difficulty that we as women found, especially several years ago. So I do believe that there is success. We're seeing those numbers come up slightly. And in our case, it's telling other women that, you know, it's doable and it's exciting. And then also getting in front of the leadership in mining companies to explain the simple things like facilities. Again, we shouldn't be having to explain that in 2022, but it is still partly there. In addition, I think the biggest thing is really talking to other women and telling them what all they can accomplish in this environment today in mining. The one other thing that I'd like to mention is at mining companies, and I talk to our clients quite often about, let's really look at the millennial generation and the Gen Z generation, because mining has got to catch up. And that is one place I feel that we can really make a quick difference, is making sure our benefits align with what is important to those generations, and in particularly women in those generations. Women who are raising families, they can have a career in mining and raise families if the leadership looks with a little broader mindset of how to make that easier for them. So I think the generational changes are something that we can make a quick changes on in the mining industry. It doesn't have to be the good old boys club anymore. Let's really look at what's important to those younger generations.
For sure, I agree. And Danielle, I know you mentioned some of the challenges that women face. I think another thing is not having so many women to look up to in that high positions makes it hard. So in talking about mentors, how important is it to have female mentors to guide women through this stage of their career? And what can companies do to find more female mentors? And in case, or in the absence of female mentors, what should they do? Should they look for male mentors in the industry? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there are not a lot of women in the industry. I think that mentorship, or more importantly, I think sponsorship, where you're working with someone that is actually going to actively work with you to create opportunities for you, you know, in addition to mentors. So I think that is a really critical aspect of development that we can continue to build on in this industry. And picking up from some of the comments that I heard is how do we think about talent in a different way, and how do we think about capabilities versus only experience? And because if we think about how we attract talent and how we develop talent and how we succession plan for talent, if we think about talent in a different way, we might open additional opportunities in our industry. And I want to give an example of an opportunity that I had to sponsor someone a few years ago, and it just came to me. And I was working for a mining company. We had 2 mines in Spain, and we were producing copper concentrate in doré, and we were having a lot of issues with the marketing of our concentrate, how to get it to the port, the deleterious element management, the whole logistics. We were told by our off-taker that we were a bit of a, I'm going to say we were a bit of a disaster in how we were managing that logistics area. And so I was walking by the receptionist desk one day, and I looked at the young woman that was there, and I thought to myself, wow, I've been here for a couple of years. This woman has, brought CEOs to, CEO to site, analysts, etc. She's done an unbelievable job in the people moving logistics on that. And why not actually have her become the head of marketing for copper concentrate? I can share with you that the general manager thought I was crazy. How could I put the receptionist in charge of marketing our copper concentrate? And in my mind, we were moving rocks, and she had been responsible for moving people and dealing with all of the logistics and an organization. So clearly she had the capabilities of being organized, communicating. People had feelings, rocks don't have feelings. And so in my head, it all sort of made sense. Yeah. And so I, having had the opportunity to actually be the boss of the GM, I was able to actually promote her. She took on the role, and we set her up for success in terms of educating her around the product, the deleterious element, and so on, and sort of put a platform around her to ultimately help her succeed and at her role. And then we went from being at the bottom of the list of customers that this particular off-taker was dealing with to being in the top 5 in terms of how we manage the logistics and so on. So I just want to use that as an example around the sponsorship and how you can think about roles differently, and how you can identify talent and think about what you can do with that talent based on the capabilities of that talent, and how you can help talent pivot through different roles in our industry versus just necessarily looking for, okay, I'm looking for someone that has marketed copper concentrate for the last 10 years and checks the following boxes. So that's how I think about mentorship, sponsorship. And then I think the other thing is that, not everybody knows what a mentor should do or a sponsor should do and how they should work with talent. And I think helping mentors and helping sponsors figure out how they could do their part on that is again something that I think we can do better in the industry, to say, here's how you can think about how you can help this person. And my last comment on this is just succession planning. I so much believe that being really disciplined about succession planning is so critical, and having personal development plans for talent and helping talent navigate through that succession plan. I know that there are still a number of people in this industry that resist succession planning. They feel that somehow that is pushing the individual out the door. It is not. But if we invest in talent and identify, 2 or 3 successors, particularly for supervisor roles, manager roles, and so on, we could really accelerate the promotion of women, because at the rate that we're going, we're going to be here 50 years from now and be having the same discussion on that. So we've got to think about what we can do differently to really accelerate the pace. If you think about what's happened on boards and the changes that have taken place over the last 5 years on boards, is because we have thought about talent in a different way. Not everybody on a board has to be a current CEO or a former CEO. And it is when we got away from thinking about attracting a new board member that is a CEO of a former CEO, and we thought about what kind of skill set do we need around the boardroom table. It's really only then that we broke on the back of the diversity around the boardroom table. And now that we're seeing the composition of boards be different, we have to do the same thing in the management roles and the supervisor roles, because we have not seen the same progression on that level as we've seen around the boardroom table.
Nice. Amazing. I agree. Thank you. Kind of adding on to what you said, Daniela, Monica, what can women do? What can women do who are in the industry that are looking to grow their career to kind of best position themselves to find mentors?
Yeah, I think it's important to, going back to some of the comments from Daniela, that it's important to understand the distinction in between a mentor and a sponsor. Every single promotion that I've seen is sponsored by someone or by a group internally in a company. And it comes naturally. A lot of the times it's a combination of talent and a sponsorship, because they recognize that talent or because they do like that person for various reasons. But that happens naturally, and a lot of times in companies. Sometimes there is a plan, obviously, on succession, and there is a special training that brings that person to that position. So that is for sponsorship. And I've been really lucky I did have sponsors that also turned into my mentors throughout my career. And I also had just pure mentors, people that just mentor me. And I think what's important is to understand this differentiation and what the role entails, because what happens many times is companies establish an internal mentorship program, and automatically the person selected or the person that applies to it thinks that they have a chance for promotion. And that also, what it does is many times it creates uncertainty in the mentor to say, oh, well, I don't want this responsibility. A lot of times also the mentor doesn't want to be a mentor and needs to be convinced, or because, and this is for programs that are like mentorship programs internally in the company, right? Because they feel that there is a long-time commitment on this, which is not necessarily the case. I think a mentor not necessarily needs to talk to that person every single month or every single week about certain topics. Sometimes you meet with someone 2-3 times in a year. Sometimes it happens naturally because that person is close to you, and you, by emulating or by looking at the things that you like from that person, you actually try to do similar things, or you pick up from that person, you ask questions, you be curious. A lot of the times the mentor happens naturally, but a lot of the times, like in my case, one of my mentors, a women mentor, and she's actually the chair of Women in Mining, Mona Foster in BC, an amazing lady and with tons of experience. And I remember 10 years ago, I sat down with her for a coffee. I actually was curious and I was brave. And when I told her, would you be my mentor? And she said, sure. And she helped me a lot to understand from a different perspective, because a lot of times I had male mentors. I don't think mentors should be defined by gender. I think mentors are defined by times in your life where you need certain things from someone. And it could be a man, it could be a woman, and vice versa. I think it would be great that a guy goes and sits with a woman and says, I would love you to be my mentor. Because I think everybody can give the other different perspectives, different ways of viewing things. And that is actually what enriches the conversation, and also what makes for a successful, I would say, industry in this case, which is what we're discussing, right? We're trying to get a more gender neutral industry, but at the same time, that won't happen until we start to work together and understand that we are different and it's okay to be different. Yeah. And so in that difference, we actually will nurture ourselves and learn. So I think it's actually good sometimes when you have a male sponsor or a male mentor and a woman, and vice versa. And so again, being curious, I think, and being just being bold and just going and say, hey, would you be my mentor? In my work, most of the times they will say yes. Yeah. And, that I'm not going to be taking tons of your time, but prepare your questions and be ready, because when you work with a mentor, especially when it's a good mentor, they will tell you things that you might not want to hear. And you need to be open to that, because a lot of times we go to the mentor to whine about our lives and why things are not going the way we want and why things are not amazingly well in our careers. But a lot of times we need to listen to the other person's point of view. Like I always say, we think we're in a way, I can define myself and think I'm pretty sure this is how I am. And then the rest of the world looks at me different. In between those two opinions, that's me. That's actually who I am. So try to listen to others, because a lot of times we learn things from that people. And there's a reason why they are what they are as well. And some things we might like, some things why not. We'll discriminate and choose what we want to learn from that person, but they always end up enriching us at the end of the day. So I think, again, it shouldn't be defined by gender. And we should try. Everybody should have a mentor at one point without expectations of a promotion. And then naturally you will get sponsors internally and in the world. I mean, wherever you are, you will get sponsors and you will get mentors.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that. So we want to now move into the retention stage, which is kind of the mid to late career stage. I want to look at some of the challenges as well as opportunities and successes. So I want to direct my first question to Simon. And I came across a McKinsey article that they published in September 2021, and they talked about how the drop off from entry level to executive for females in mining is amongst the most drastic across all industries that they've studied. Do you agree with this? And if so, can you share some stats, reports, and some of your thoughts?
Yeah, it's an interesting report and a good point. I mean, looking into some of the work BHP done, they looked at their teams where there's a strong female representation, and there's 70% better safety record, 11% better production rate, and there's been report after report showing a diverse management team and board does create a better workforce, more profitable, safer, and so on. So looking into the mining industry, and this way you can get lost in the world of stats, but the Canadian Board Diversity Council looked at the FP 500, and the women executive officers sit at 15% at the moment, and that's gone up slightly from 2017 when it was 14%. So although it's a slight increase, it's not the best. But then when you're looking back to, I think what Jamie said and also what Dan said, when the workforce starting off 10 to 15%, that seems it's been quite stable, people progressing through the industry. But when you look beyond the information, only 4 to 5% of those individuals are actually from the mining industry. So we're losing a significant amount of individuals at that kind of mid-management stage, then having to bring people in from external, females in from external industries to start filling those more senior roles as well. So look, I mean, just from a company point of view, and this is what we've seen when we're doing our searches, we have an internal target of 50% representation in our searches of female talent. It's not the easiest to do within the mining industry for obvious reasons. So what we have noticed when doing slightly more junior roles, there's more individuals from the industry, but when we're doing more senior board level roles, we are doing extensive searching to related industries, where there's those transferable skill sets across as well. And speaking to females who left the industry, some of their views, one is they thought there wasn't any succession for them. They couldn't see where they could progress. And we talk about having strong female success stories. I think often we talk about the bad in the industry, but it's good on the panel here as well. People showing, look, I enjoy the industry. This is why I like it. It's showing people there is that long-term career. But the people coming out of the industry asking why, and I think Danielle touched on this, which is quite interesting. When me and my wife moved to Australia, she was looking for a job, and then she would look at the job advert. Every single point on the requirements, if you didn't tick every single one, she's like, oh, I can't apply for that job. I haven't got everything on it. And I'm like, just go for it. It's fine. And I think it comes down to, and we're working with our clients on this one as well, is look, encouraging the female members of staff to go for those promotions. And it's not just down to female leaders do this, it's male leaders, everyone in the business. Put people forward, encourage them. Often females have, and again, as Daniel mentioned, have taken different routes to the leadership roles. It's not just, A, B, C, D. They could go over here and here. But often we get from our clients, oh, we need somebody who's done A, B, C, D. So it's educating to open up. And also we're seeing, even when it's those internal promotions and those review boards, you've just got a bunch of middle-aged white men all there judging on it. So again, language used in the job descriptions, looking into getting diverse interview panels as well, and then encouraging people to go for these promotions will stop the dropout rate, because people are leaving the industry. We're getting all that experience and moving to other industries where they're offering more flexible working, they're offering all these other things which the mining industry's not caught up on yet as well. And as you mentioned before, we've got Amazon, Google, all these other people taking people from the industry now, and they're not competing. So yeah, we definitely see a large dropout of individuals progressing, even though they're coming in again more at the top end. They're not necessarily people that have grown up through the industry. So I think a lot of work does need to be done, and like say that retention piece, make people see you can start from here and go all the way to the top in the industry, and support people on that journey.
All right, thank you, Simon. I'm just having a look at the time and all the questions coming in. A lot of good, interesting questions. So I just wanted to finish off this panel discussion just to talk to Andrea and ask lastly, how do we keep women in the industry? Please talk about the importance of culture and belonging.
Hi, Akwiya. Yeah, thanks for that. And lots of really great points that have been brought forth, I think, by all of our panelists. Again, I'm gonna look at it through the lens of my research and the 7 years leading up to this, also this research. So there's a lot of factors that have come in, but if we want to attract, retain, and create a sustainable talent pipeline, companies need to understand the impact of microaggressions, racism, and discrimination, and then create behavior and metrics that counteract their occurrence. So you've heard everyone on the panel kind of talk around these issues, but when we look at the questions that are being asked around equity, diversity, and inclusion, as well as look at the lens of, how do we make women feel like they belong and help them feel that they belong so that they actually stay in the industry, the first piece where we are actually asking and starting with the wrong perception is that the research shows that the main question that leaders are asking is, how can we acquire, train, and change diverse employees for them to thrive and succeed in our culture? So we actually did meta-analysis around this question, and that is the question that's being asked. And this question actually misguides the focus into actions of assimilation rather than creating specific measurable behaviors and governance metrics that enforce sustainable change. So the question, how do we hire these diverse employees so that they fit in? What that does is it creates this fit in or risk exclusion from opportunities norm. And that's the norm that's driving the negative reputation within not only the mining industry, but also in male-dominated industries. So for real change to occur, employees need to experience belonging from the onset of recruitment through organizational culture, and it needs to be communicated by leadership on an ongoing basis. And there needs to be metrics that continue to govern that progression. So when we look at going back to the data and we look at the mining specific questions that we measured in the study, we asked items such as, I've been embarrassed by being the only. Personal protection equipment is made to fit my body type and size. Accessible bathrooms are always available. Signage is safe and fair for everyone. Job postings and recruitment practices are fair to everyone. And the suggestion box is read, shared, and acted on. All of those items were also predictors of belonging in this study. That's really important that we start understanding that these factors create the microaggressions that continue to occur. And so the only way to counteract them is to look at the behaviors that create comfort, that create contribution, that create connection and psychological safety, and enhance well-being of the population within the industry. Now, the one last item that was so telling, and I really can't wait to get this information out, because This was the question that produced the highest statistical significance. And the question was, diversity and inclusion is important to my employer. Now, not only did that question predict an overall sense of belonging within the results, it also statistically changed depending on the intersections of identity. So if somebody was other than male, other than white, the answer to this question greatly affected how the participant experienced belonging. That information is incredibly important because as we look at the greater population and the studies that are coming out with equity, diversity, and inclusion, we see that most microaggressions towards Black women specifically are coming from white women. When we look at microaggressions that are coming within industry-wide elements, we have to understand that racism, discrimination, and microaggressions are actually on the rise. They're not going away. They're becoming more covert. And so if we want women to stay within the industry, we have to create the, we have to get away from this illusion of knowledge that EDI or CSR or ESG is this, when really we have to start looking at the data that shows real information that is then going to drive how our talent responds. So if belonging is our main indicator that affects job satisfaction, motivation, and engagement, these metrics can be married and put into your governance and put into how you're actually looking at the progression of your talent and how that progression then fits in with these other factors, because the world has changed. Fundamentally, talent is now looking at what is it that this company offers me that's going to keep me here and it's going to motivate me to be engaged. And until we start looking at this through that specific lens, we're going to continue to see behaviors that continue to exclude and ostracize women. And that's a fundamental change that has to occur in order for us to see the metrics and the data shift as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So that wraps up our panel discussion portion of the event, and we will now move to the Q&A. Lots of great questions coming in. So I will just ask the questions and everyone feel free to answer them if you want. So first question comes from Juan, and his question is, were the goals of having more women in mining unrealistic? I'm throwing it out to anyone on the panel.
Maybe I'll jump in on that one.
Yeah.
I think that it's hard to say that they're unrealistic. I think in what I was talking about earlier, I was advocating for taking a look at the goals by different occupations instead of just maybe one broader kind of blunt industry metric. It would be better if it was sort of case by case. And it's kind of sensitive to say that someone's goal is not realistic. I think the goal from my point of view is to kind of tease out what it will take to make that goal real. Rather than say that's not realistic and wag your finger, it's sort of saying, so if you want this goal, here's what it's going to take. And I'm mostly speaking again about representation in mining. So you're going to need this many new graduates, you're going to need this many new people entering into the industry. And then we can have a conversation about, is that a likely thing that's going to happen or not?
Okay, thank you. A question from Susan, and she is asking this question to Monica. And how widespread are the problems of sexual harassment that were made public by Rio Tinto's recent report on this issue in Australia?
Actually, I volunteered to answer that one.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up in Latin America. Susan, I actually know Susan really well. I'm honored that she's here today. She's a very well-regarded professional. And I grew up in Latin America, and my first 16 years of career, I was a journalist. Let me tell you, every day I was harassed by men, made inappropriate comments, very inappropriate comments. A few times I had to drop from a job because of the decision that if I wanted to stay, I had to basically do certain things that I was not interested in doing. I have to say that it happened to me in Canada as well in the food industry, because when I just moved to Canada as an immigrant, I was making minimum wage, supporting my son and my doggy. And I remember exactly the day I went to ask $2 more for the minimum wage, that the manager said, yes, in exchange of a kiss, I'll give you the other $2 per hour. So this happens in every industry where women are. This doesn't only happen in mining. What happened is that Rio Tinto was brave enough to tell the truth what's happening in their workforce. But let me tell you, this has happened in my entire career. Funny enough, interesting enough, it never happened to me in mining. I was never harassed. I was never mistreated. I was never inappropriately approached or anything. But that's just my story. It could have happened, and obviously is happening to a lot of other women. I think what will make the difference is that we have real zero harassment policies internal in the company, real limitations, and real belief. And when we actually have someone like with our grievances systems, internal grievance systems are strong. And when someone comes forward with a harassment grievance, be strong about it and actually follow through and do the right thing. And I think that when all these things happen, but also have a real discussion with all the supervisors, superintendents, because a lot of the things that we see, we don't see them on a high level. We don't see them. We don't necessarily see them with the CEO. We don't see them with that people. We see them at the mid-management level a lot. And those things need to change, but the responsibility of changing is from the company, actually. We have to change it. We have to create stronger policies, stronger management, stronger strategies, stronger metrics, and stronger decisions around how we behave. And that's the program that we create in our company about respect, that is discussing all these things. So what did it create, that program? It created actually an increase on grievances. And I always said it to our senior executives from the beginning, this is gonna happen, but it's actually a good sign. It means that people feel that they have a voice. Yeah. So all these things are important for a company. But again, this is not preventive of our industry. This happens in every industry in the world.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Monica. Allison is asking, what are companies doing for diversity and inclusion training? Is it enough? As an example, training and awareness of unconscious bias. People outside of the minority groups need to be aware of the issues and drive change. The people in the minority group can only do so much. So yeah, I guess the question is, what are companies doing for diversity and inclusion training? Is it enough?
I don't mind to answer this question. I've been in the industry for 15 years. And what I've seen is that there has been a massive push for unconscious bias training. What most companies don't understand is that unconscious bias training creates more unconscious microaggressions. We actually see the meta-analysis of this. We need to understand that in order for you to counter the microaggressions that are on the rise, we actually need to introduce behaviors we want to see, not of what we don't want to see, because from a neuroscience perspective, we repeat what we learn and what we know. So when we look at the collective intentionality, and I discussed this in my initial white paper, it's actually on the Women in Mining website called Unrealized Growth in Mining. But when we look at the collective intentionality of equity, diversity, and inclusion. If we want to change the way that people are seen, valued, and heard, we actually need to provide them a voice. And that voice can't be heard if we're not actually paying attention to our minority groups. And what that means is that as we move, so the first body of my research was all of the looking at the data and the metrics of the belonging. The next portion of the data is to actually look at belonging behaviors so that we can start changing what the behaviors are. Now, what we see is that, and I actually saw this in the chat somewhere, the chat's going a little bit fast right now, but we see that the people who actually get their resume or their CV in front of someone who can make a decision is often biased based on who they are and what their networks are. And when we look at the challenges that we see Equity, diversity, and inclusion, although it's looking at training, what we really need to stop doing is we need to, yes, uncover the bias that exists and the bias that exists with even looking at CVs, but we also need to uncover the difference between performative actions and authentic actions so that we can create allyship that changes who is seen, who is listened to, and who is heard. So until those pieces are put in place, we will continue to struggle with equity, diversity, and inclusion. Let's face it, equity, diversity, and inclusion is $1 billion industry and has been for over 10 years. The only reason it is not moving a dial is because we're not looking at it through a lens of what it is that we want to see versus what we're scared to see. And I think when it comes to even looking at, Rio's fantastic paper, is that they understand that what is not measured does not change. So until we start having organizations that reveal the data and the baseline elements that aren't pretty and that aren't okay, it doesn't mean that these companies are bad companies. It means that the companies have growth and opportunities and areas for improvement. But until they recognize where they have those lower metrics and numbers, they cannot change what they are seeing, and the industry will continue to struggle to attract more people into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. A question from Colleen, and she directs her questions to Simon. Simon, how do we overcome the fact that most promotions in mining are not advertised? Agree and love your encouragement to go for it, but my experience in mining is that many mid to high level management roles are filled through word of mouth or recruiter, which makes it difficult.
It's, a very, very good question. And I think it's something where the transparency is key. As you say, a lot of the searches we get are often, confidential searches or things of that nature where they're not necessarily going out so people aren't visible. The one thing we always ask is, who is there identified internally who we can include in the process? And, we want to, even if they've come from maybe slightly outside the typical route, include in the normal process would include any external candidates that are getting the fair opportunity for those roles. But I think it's something where, some people who work for the mining companies here may be able to talk about their own companies, but it's really then having that opportunity where we are really, the company's looking internally first, seeing the individuals. Again, it comes to, with females maybe taking different routes and not necessarily having those obvious routes. So as Danielle said, making the managers be open-minded, encourage them to speak to wider, geographic individuals within the business who might not just be the natural number two in charge, but then could bring different skill sets where you think outside the typical can have fantastic results. So it's just giving them the confidence and encouragement, I think, to speak to and interview more individuals. It is difficult because a lot of times the conversations with hiring managers be, well, I just want this, the standard background, anything outside of that they're not going to speak to. I think part is creating the confidence for people to apply, but when they're not necessarily applying for the roles because not advertised, really encouraging the managers just to open up who they're speaking to, encourage them to speak to a wider range of individuals. We're working with one of our clients at the moment, and we've really pushed them to interview a wider range of internal and external females to actually get more people in the process from day one. And surprisingly, there's more females at the end process because they're realizing, actually, on paper, it's not exactly what I was looking for, but really like this individual. So it's just getting them to have that confidence to do it, and then also sharing the success and the stories, but maybe getting the companies just to be more open to how to do that internally as well. But it's always been a challenge, and I think more transparency we can do can help with that.
All right, thank you, Simon. Carolina asks, how can we get on boards or develop to join non-executive boards?
I can kind of do this one for nonprofits because I am on the board of Women in Mining Canada as a young person representative. I would say just go for it. The application is usually open for nonprofits every year or every 2 years, and you can apply and get voted in through that. And that'll give you, at the very least, a good basis to then go on to the board of a company afterwards, later on. So a lot of people will tell you start with nonprofits. Their
Mm,
applications are open usually every year.
okay. Thank you, Melanie. Grazina asked, what the mining companies do about informing about the mining industry amongst, sorry, not sure what this reads. I guess she means, what does the mining companies do about informing people amongst high school students? So what are mining companies doing, I guess, to get through to high school students? Is there any kind of marketing or promotional going out to those students?
You know, I can speak to it here. I sit in Northern Nevada. I honestly think that we can do a much better job as a mining industry in this particular aspect. We do see things that are, we see science fairs, just people dropping into local schools from the mining industry. So just real basic and real, but I don't see big programs designed to get into those schools as young as the elementary or middle schools, as we call them. I think that we can do a lot better job and do that a lot more and make it a program that is, like we talked about earlier, measured, and make sure that we are getting out there to those schools and to get interest from children. So I think we can do better there.
Yeah, okay.
I just want to add something very quickly to that one. In the UK, as I mentioned, almost mining's been a bit of a forgotten industry to a lot of individuals, where they see the coal mines from years ago and don't realise there's this multi-billion industry out there. Anglo-American have been doing a fantastic job with the Woodsmith project, where they've actually been really promoting mining to sort of girls in schools, showing it's a career and a future with that. And I think it's more and more of the mining companies just showing them the mine sites, showing them the careers, as Melanie touched on as well, just seeing what's out there, going to site and showing that there is this fantastic career out there. Before, when I was at school and university, it was never talked about a career you could potentially have. So I think the more we talk about it, share success stories, and people talking about how great the industry is, will really help with that attraction and getting them in the schools and showing what fantastic industry it can be.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Another question from Juan.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one more thing on that one. I have seen some efforts from mining companies to reach out to younger people and younger girls. However, they're usually focused on the schools in their own communities as part of their community outreach. So what we're seeing is more the mining companies are reaching out to mining towns and young people in mining towns to recruit them to the mining industry, versus they're not really going outside of those towns into places where mining is really not a part of everyday life. For example, I grew up in Ottawa, and I mean, apart from the government and the National Resource Ministry, there's really not much going on there, so we never learned about it. But I know if you grow up in Sudbury, you know about it because you live it every day. The companies go to the high schools and the elementary schools. So we kind of need a bit of a more industry-wide effort to reach out to more communities and not just the ones that are already linked to mining.
Okay. All right, thank you, Melanie. An anonymous person asked, are any of you doing any internal look back analysis to see how aligned your past behaviors are with your future goals, to identify the areas with highest opportunities for correction or behavior, for instance?
Yeah, I can answer that. Yes, we have done definitely. Part of the things that we decided to ramp up onto, which is the Build and Respect Together program and the grievance. We have 2 systems of grievances inside of our company, and all those came after a lot of analysis that we've done on, on workforce. Previous census that we did with the workforce as well, where we asked them, we do an annual census of stakeholders that includes the majority of our workers, and we have asked questions about from racist and harassment and a lot of other questions. Those were some of the baselines that we use as well to make the following decisions. And then obviously we are checking with our workforce how they feel about the things that we're doing them right. I personally am in charge of the Build with Respect Together program, also with the HR department. And I actually just came from a training in Timmins to our workforce. And we personally listen to our workers and continue bringing that feedback. I think it's really important. I think every company, I don't think there's one company that doesn't have had situations that they need to improve. But it's acknowledging those things and trying to improve them. And I was seeing actually in the chat, someone from Rio Tinto saying that they can see that the culture is changing in there, and it's great. You can see it just by publishing that report. So, when you see companies making efforts, you need to acknowledge that too, because it is not easy to acknowledge when you're making efforts because you made mistakes or because you let mistakes happen. So I think that it's important that everybody does the way they can, and it starts sometimes small, but same with policies that some companies do have policies, some of them don't, but just start with a policy. Whatever it takes you is already a nod that you're taking this seriously.
All right, thank you, Monica. And just to wrap up the questions, I wanted to just ask this last question from April, and she asked, what is the mining industry doing to promote the industry to current and future workforce? Anyone want to take that one on?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Oh, gone. I was just from our, we sort of, although we sit within it slightly externally being a consultancy, but we are seeing that more and more so. You are seeing that the mining companies are talking about the career possibilities, talking about just the differences they're making within communities, really within the options. Where going back a while ago, I know we keep mentioning about this old boys club, but it was very much quite an enclosed industry. But it's definitely opened a lot more, and we have seen from the companies we're dealing with, they are working a lot more, whether it's stories through LinkedIn, dealing with sort of roadshows, but really helping to show that there is a career in the future of everybody in the business. Obviously, as Diana touched about the succession planning, but showing what else there can be ahead and not just, this is it. So, I mean, yeah, we are seeing changes. And we are seeing more and more positive stories coming out there. But I think there's work to do where with the mining companies more externally, as we talked about.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Thank you, everyone, for all the great questions. A big thank you to our panelists for taking the time out of their busy schedules to be here today. There's a lot more questions. We will get back to everyone via email with responses to your questions. So do look out for that. Before we close, I just wanted to give an opportunity to Stephanie from Rio Tinto, who was a mentee on the International Women in Mining program in 2020, just to speak briefly about the mentorship program and her experience and what she got out of it.
Yes, thank you. It seems I cannot unlock the video. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so my name is Stephanie. Maybe I can give a little bit background upon myself. I am 38 years old. I live in Quebec, close to our Rio Tinto RTFT plant in Sorel, which is an hour off of Montreal. I've been working with Rio for 7.5 years now. And when I started in 2014, I entered Rio as a customer service representative for one of our powders plant. And I used to replace someone that was on maternity leave. So for me, it was just a touch and go sort of opportunity. However, after 3 months, they offered me a permanent position, which I was really grateful for. But after a while, I started seeing that working with customer service was pleasant and I enjoyed what I was doing in my team. But I had the feeling that I could accomplish probably something more. And my sort of perspective and what I wanted to do in my career was changing as well at that time. Keep in mind that Rio is a really good employer in my region and the salaries are a lot higher than other businesses around. But to a certain extent, after one point, you also have your own personal goals and you want to grow as an individual. And I started having discussions with my leader, and my leader was great. wanted to promote me as well. But as customer service sometimes is looked upon, it's more of an entry level type of position. So after a few years, I really outgrew my role, and I had the feeling that if something didn't change and I couldn't get promoted or try to go and grow in the company, I would need to do a change for myself. And the mentoring program really happened at the right time, if I can say it. I was on a Rio Tinto app one evening, and I saw this program that Rio was sort of involved in, and they were looking for 5 women to fill spots in the International Women in Mining Mentoring Program. So I put in my I sent in my resume for it, and the next day I got news that I was chosen. And it turns out that my manager, he couldn't promote me in my role because there was no upscales, but he did do promotion for me and flagged me as someone that would put after a while if I didn't reach a next step or whatnot. So I started the mentoring program. I was paired with somebody outside from Rio. I think this is great because that person does not have the Rio Tinto culture. So she doesn't know how it works, and she really is neutral to it. I was paired with someone from the UK that had been in her company for close to 30 years. And basically what we did is work on my career map. So who am I as an individual? What do I want to do with my career? What are my limitations? What do I need to focus on? What can I get out of it? And after 6 months, I enrolled back into university. I checked items on my list. I was able to have right tools in order to sell myself better, if I can say it that way, have an approach with other leaders differently. She gave me, and the program gave me, the right tools in my toolbox to go and ask the right questions to the right people. And I started that in 2020. So I actually had 2 promotions since then. I changed role 2 times. And for me, it's been a blessing, and I'm trying to get other women to be in those programs, because it's hard, like being in a big corporation, either for men and women, it's hard, but sometimes making your place when it's a male dominant industry is even harder. And that's what I found for me, that people liked me and I was good in what I did, but didn't see me in other roles. So you need to do your own publicity. And in order to do it, I needed the extra push from that program to do it. So I recommend it massively to everybody that feels that they are stuck a little bit, but need the extra push into going into it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
I know I speak fast, but if you have questions, no worries.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Stephanie. So yeah, this goes to show that there are resources available. You just kind of have to put in the work and look. After the event, we are going to put some resources available on the shift.edumind.com website. So do have a look at that. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone for participating today. I'd like to thank our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to be here today. A big thank you to our sponsors, New Golden Capstone, who helped make this event possible. At the end of the event, when you log out, there will be a survey. If you can please take some time to fill that out, that would greatly help us. Thank you all for attending. We hope you were inspired by this conversation and you can go out and make a difference. And we hope to see you on future events and future EduMind courses. Thank you.